All right, let's jump right into this. Welcome to this explainer where we are going to decode the incredibly complex 2,000-year-old institution of Catholic marriage. Now, whether you grew up in the church or you're just a massive history buff, this is a seriously fascinating subject. Why? Well, historically speaking, Catholic matrimonial law actually shaped the basis for pretty much all European secular marriage laws right up to the Reformation. So, to really grasp Western marriage as we know it today, we have to understand exactly how the Catholic Church built it from the ground up. Here's our agenda for today. We're going to cover 1. The sacrament of matrimony, 2. The history of Catholic marriage, 3. Rules for a valid union, 4. Navigating mixed marriages, 5. Annulments versus divorce, and finally, 6. Modern stances and controversies. Let's kick things off with Section 1, the sacrament of matrimony. So we have to start with the foundation, right? What exactly does the Church believe marriage actually is? Take a look at the very precise language used here in the Code of Canon Law. It specifically calls marriage a covenant. That's huge, because it means that in the eyes of the Church, this isn't just some human institution or a basic civil contract. It's an intimate community of life and love established by the Creator. For baptized Christians, it's literally elevated to the dignity of a sacrament, meaning it's considered an active, efficacious sign of Christ's presence. And it has two main purposes: the good of the spouses and the procreation and education of offspring. Moving on to Section 2, History of Catholic Marriage. Now that we know what it is today, we really have to look back. It's so interesting to see how the Church's views on marriage have evolved over time. Surprisingly, early Christians absolutely didn't place marriage on the highest pedestal. Heavily influenced by the Apostle Paul, the early Church actually viewed celibacy and virginity as a higher, more holy calling. Paul basically wrote that while he wished everyone could remain single just like him, marriage was a totally fine concession. Back then, it was often framed as being better to marry than to burn with passion. It was kind of viewed as a safety net for those who just lacked the self-control for strict celibacy. Let's trace how this built up over the centuries. In the first century, as we said, there's that strong preference for celibacy. But fast forward to 401 AD, and St. Augustine comes along to write on the good of marriage, vigorously defending it against groups who claimed marriage was flat-out evil. So he really laid the groundwork for its value. Still, it wasn't until the Synod of Verona in 1184 AD that the Church officially declared marriage a sacrament, mostly to push back against radical sects that thought procreation was sinful. And finally, in 1563, the Council of Trent really dropped the hammer. Up until then, couples could basically just promise themselves to each other in total secret. Trent changed all that by requiring canonical form, meaning a priest and witnesses had to be present, which completely changed how marriages were recorded across Europe. Section 3, Rules for a Valid Union. With that historical foundation in place, let's look at the highly specific, binding legal framework of modern canon law. Think of it like a strict checklist. To form a valid Catholic union today, 4 elements absolutely must be present. First, both spouses have to be free to marry under church law. Second, they must freely exchange consent, so no coercion whatsoever. Third, they must have the intention for life, for fidelity, and be open to having children. And fourth, they have to follow that canonical form we mentioned, getting married before an authorized minister and at least 2 witnesses. If any of these are missing without special permission, the union just doesn't exist in the eyes of the Church. And this perfectly illustrates one of the coolest, most unique aspects of Catholic theology. Look really closely at the definition of matrimonial consent. Did you notice who is actually doing the giving and accepting? It's the man and the woman. What this means is that the couple themselves confer the sacrament of matrimony upon each other. The priest doesn't actually marry the couple. He's just there to assist, witness, and make sure everything aligns with canon law. But you've got to watch out because there are rigid impediments that act as absolute roadblocks to making this contract. Some are pretty obvious, like consanguinity, which just means you can't marry your close relatives. You also can't have a prior existing marriage bond or be an ordained priest. But then there are the extreme ones, like abduction. You definitely can't kidnap someone and validly marry them. Or crimen, which is conspiring to murder your current spouse so you can marry someone else. Yeah, you absolutely cannot do that and expect to get married in the Church. Section 4, Navigating Mixed Marriages. Now let's see what happens when a Catholic wants to marry outside the faith. The Church actually sorts mixed marriages into 2 very distinct buckets, and it's based entirely on baptism. If a Catholic marries a baptized non-Catholic, like a baptized Lutheran, for example, the Church views that as a valid and fully supernatural sacrament, though you do still need permission from a bishop. However, if a Catholic marries an unbaptized person, the Church views that as a valid but purely natural marriage. It is not considered a sacrament. To even enter into that natural marriage with a non-Christian, you literally have to get what's called a special dispensation from disparity of cult from your local bishop. And it comes with some serious conditions. The Catholic party must formally promise to remove any dangers of falling away from their own faith, and they have to promise to do everything in their power to have all their children baptized and raised in the Catholic Church.
Section 5. Annulments versus divorce. Okay, let's dive into what is arguably the single most misunderstood concept in all of Catholic marriage law. A lot of people think an annulment is just the Catholic version of a divorce, but they are fundamentally different things. A divorce is a civil, secular action that takes an existing marriage bond and breaks it apart. Because the Church teaches that a valid sacramental marriage is entirely indissoluble, it simply doesn't recognize civil divorce. An annulment, officially called a declaration of nullity, is a totally different legal process. It's a finding by a church tribunal that a true, valid marriage contract literally never existed in the first place because something essential was missing on the wedding day.
So the absolutely critical takeaway here is that bad behavior later on doesn't magically erase the marriage. If a couple genuinely means their vows on their wedding day, but someone commits adultery 5 years later, that adultery does not invalidate the original marriage. For an annulment to be granted, the flaw, whether that's a hidden impediment, coercion, or maybe a secret intention to never have kids, had to be present at the exact moment they said "I do." Section 6. Modern stances and controversies. Finally, let's explore how the Church interacts with our modern social climate, bringing us to current stances and internal debates. According to the Catechism, the Church maintains strict traditional teachings on what constitutes a sin against the dignity of marriage. Impartially speaking, the Church views acts like adultery, civil divorce, polygamy, and same-sex unions as contrary to moral law. On top of that, practices that are pretty common today, like cohabitation before marriage or using contraception, which the Church views as a deliberate refusal of the procreative potential of conjugal love, are also strictly forbidden by Church teaching.
Yet, as you can see here, there is a fascinating internal tension happening right now, particularly regarding same-sex couples. In 2021, the Vatican issued a clear statement affirming the Church lacks the power to bless same-sex unions. But then just 2 years later, in 2023, a Vatican document called Fiducia Supplicans clarified that priests actually could offer simple blessings to individuals in non-liturgical settings, as long as it's not confused with a sacramental marriage. Meanwhile, regional bishops, like those in the German synodal path, have voted to allow formalized blessing ceremonies in their dioceses. It really showcases a very active, ongoing debate within the global hierarchy on how to apply ancient theology to modern realities.
Which leaves us with a profound question to chew on. How will this massive, 2,000-year-old institution continue to balance its incredibly rigid, historically layered canon law with the rapidly shifting cultural landscape of the 21st century? It is quite the delicate balancing act between past and present. I really hope this explainer helped you understand the fascinating and complex mechanics behind